Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today it is time for Friday Reads on November as usual, I do not know, the 22nd. I verified it with my handy dandy calendar. I hope that you have been well this week. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm distracted by many things. International, national, and local, and within my family. It's a distracting time. I was thinking about mind over matter. I realized no, that's not it. It's mind over mind, and mind undermining my own mind and my peace of mind. But I am doing all of the self-care things I can think of, and really enjoying my booktube and reading community. And I hope that you are doing the same. And I've talked about all these things at length the past couple weeks, so I won't go back over them, but just sometimes I just cannot believe the reality that is currently surrounding me. But let us talk of other things. The big award announcement was the National Book Award, and I did not realize. I did watch that ceremony. I didn't know it was going to be a 2-hour ceremony, but I actually really enjoyed it a lot. I absolutely loved Barbara Kingsolver's speech. She was given, I don't remember the name of this award, but it's kind of like a Lifetime Achievement Award, except she's got a lot of life left in her, I am sure. But she gave a marvelous speech. I would recommend going back and just watching that if you have time. And I was so thrilled for Percival Everett winning the fiction award for James. I had my fingers crossed. It was like the Oscars. It was the very last award at the very, very end. And I was so pleased and delighted that he won. And also, just everybody's acceptance speeches were excellent. And I was so intrigued by every book that won an award that I have not yet read. I was jotting them down right and left. So that was fun. And then also this week, my banned book club met at the public library. And this month's book was A Streetcar Named Desire, which I talked about a couple weeks ago when I actually read it. But we did discuss it, and it was really good. The discussion ran overtime. We talked for about an hour and a half. The group was larger than usual as well. And we had a really good conversation. And as far as being a banned book, that book was more a victim of censorship than banning, actually. It's not so much a history of challenges in school or public libraries. It's more of the censorship of the content in adaptations on stage and in film. And the parts of the book that have been cut out and left in. And I don't really want to tell you what they are because it'd be spoilers if you've never read the story. If you've only ever seen the famous movie with Marlon Brando and Vivien Leigh, I do strongly encourage you to read this play because there's material that was left out that's really essential to understanding Blanche, especially, and what happened to her earlier in her life. And there's just themes that are completely missing if you have not read that part of the story. And my history with it was that I read it in high school as a play. I did eventually see that movie. So I had read it and then I saw it, and now I've read it again. And now I'd like to see it staged in its entirety. So that's where I'm at with that. But we just had a good conversation, and it kind of branched out from there to talking about the Hays Code and the history of censorship and what kind of material has been banned in movies. I thought there could be a whole separate club that's about movies and banning and censorship and the rating system and the codes. I thought that could be a whole other interesting club too. I would join that club. All right, so that's the week in bookish things. I'm also getting a hoot out of people posting about snow and cozy reading by their fireplaces and all this, because we experienced a cold front and it dropped it down into the 70s, which this is winter now. This is winter in South Texas, and this is kind of why I put up with the months of summer, because the months of winter are absolutely stellar. It's in the 70s most of the time. In the winter, it's cool in the morning, it warms up in the afternoon, and it's glorious. So it's time to break out the flannels. It's winter. All right, so television. Do I have anything new to talk about? We're watching still the Great British Baking Show. There's a couple episodes left. Bad Sisters, which is even better in the second season. So if you watched the first season and you liked it, the writing is even better. It's darker. Well, I don't know if it's darker. They're both pretty dark, but it's funnier, and the acting is, there's a new villainous character, and it's good. And then what else? Somebody Somewhere, really, really good in the third season. We have a few ideas of things to start watching, but did we? I don't know. I can't think of anything else. Let's move on to the books. That one should not be on the top. That's like the last thing I'm going to talk about. All right, I finished 2 books this week, one of which I'm not really going to discuss. I've mentioned before that I am reading Time of the Flies by Claudia Pineiro. This is the second book that we have been reading together in our Pineiro project group, and we are reading all of her translated fiction, her novels. And so this one is a sequel to the book All Yours, and we've just started the actual discussion of the book. So I am not going to get into it at this time, but I did enjoy it, and I have a lot of things I want to talk about. I'm going to save all that for the group, and then I'll come back and wrap it up after we've had our group discussion. I also did a buddy read of Louise Erdrich's new novel, The Mighty Red, with Melinda from A Web of Stories, and we enjoyed reading this book together and talking about it. Our responses to this book were very similar. It takes place in 2008. It starts in 2008, 2009, right on the beginning of the great economic downturn of that time. And some of the characters in the story, they see it coming and they realize a crisis is about to hit. Other people are kind of unaware, but whether you're aware or not, it was coming. They live in North Dakota. Many of the characters are involved in sugar beet farming. Our main character that we are first introduced to is Crystal, who runs an overnight delivery truck run of the beets. She has a teenage daughter, Kismet, who is a senior in high school, and she has a partner named Martin, who is a underemployed drama teacher. This family is part Native American. That's not a huge part of the plot in this book, which is kind of interesting for Louise Erdrich, as we do have some characters in this story who are indigenous, but the concerns and the culture are not really the crux of this story. It really has to do more about the farming industry where they live and environmental factors and economic factors. But character-wise, we have this family. Kismet is about to graduate high school. She's supposed to be thinking about which college to attend, but she's really preoccupied. 2 boys, both of who are madly in love with her. One of them is pressuring her strongly to get married right after high school. Gary belongs to the well-to-do family in town that owns a majority of the land and the farming property. Crystal, her beet delivery job is she's working for that family, the Geists. And we learn early on that Gary was involved in some kind of an accident about a year before the story takes place. That there was a party. The boys on the football team were at this party and something happened. And this is mentioned that something happened that people don't like to talk about. It has affected Gary deeply, and it takes a long time in this story before we finally hear the whole story. So there's a lot of tension about, well, what was it? What happened? Character-wise, we have Kismet, who is trying to figure out whether or not she should marry Gary. No, she should not, but I'm not going to tell you whether she does. She has Hugo, who seems to be a better match for her, but he's immature as well. They seem to have a better affinity between them, but he's got a lot of stuff to figure out as well. And then in the midst of all this, a particular financial crisis occurs involving some church money. It's a really good story. There's some unevenness in the layout of the plot that is unusual for Louise Erdrich, who's usually so much on top of how the whole story is going to be orchestrated and how everything comes together. It was uncharacteristically uneven. There's a major element of the plot involving environmental factors, which is an interesting plot line, but the way that it's presented is really kind of odd because it trickles in slowly, and then all of a sudden it late in the book it's really important, and the rollout of that part of the plot and theme was kind of unusual. We had some thoughts about the ending and the way things are resolved, and some of it was very satisfying and some of it less satisfying or harder to accept. We'll put it like that. So we thought it was a good book. We enjoyed the book. We've both read multiple books by Louise Erdrich. Did not think it was her strongest book. I don't know how many Melinda's read. I probably read maybe like 9 or 10, and I put it in the lower half of those. But it wasn't bad by any means. I wouldn't tell you don't read this book. It's good. It's enjoyable. It's hard to put down. It's just if you've read a lot of her books, I don't think you would think it was her best one. And that is where I shall leave that. But it was good. And my copy also has this extra material in the back, which is like edited out portions, pages, paragraphs, and threads that didn't make it into the final cut. And that's interesting. You don't usually get that glimpse from a writer. I imagine they all have them, but you don't always get to see them. I'm also still reading The Bead Workers by Beth Piatote. Beth Piatote is an Indigenous author. She is Nez Perce enrolled with Colville Confederated Tribes. The stories take place in the Pacific Northwest, which is where Melinda lives and who recommended this book to me. The author, Beth Piatote, now lives in the San Francisco area, but most of the stories take place, I think, in Oregon and Washington. They're contemporary stories about mostly younger people who it's just navigating everyday life, relationships, family issues, but within the context of being Native American. There's a variety of moods here. They're not related stories. So there's a story that's often funny about a pair of best friends, a straight woman and a gay man. They're young. They're just navigating bad relationships and slipping back into old patterns and trying to be each other's wingman and woman. And so that story was enjoyable. And they're also inventing sort of an imaginary Indian affairs board game that she might use for a master's thesis. And another story that was just absolutely devastating was about a young man who has been gravely injured in the military and his family on the way to go see him. Their different journeys to reach him, what they're thinking about, the history of their family, and then the next steps that they might take. But so I'm enjoying that very much. How many times can I say that? Like, why would I sit there and read a book all the way to the end if I'm not enjoying it very much? I mean, I guess I do once in a while, but that's what DNFs are made for. So if I didn't like it, I wouldn't still be reading it. So I don't know why I keep saying, oh, and I'm enjoying it. Well, duh. Okay. Let's move on. The next one was not on my TBR, and it wasn't in my 10 before the end, but it should have been, not just because I decided to read it instead of any of those, but I don't know why I forgot to put this in, because I'm kind of halfway, or maybe I'm just now reaching past the halfway point of the Tales of the City series, and so I picked up Sure of You, the next book in the series. I was looking for the familiarity and the comfort, although it's funny, like the comfort isn't always that comforting because the characters all have their problems. So it's comforting to return to them, but they're not always particularly comfortable in the story. So in this, I can't get too much into the plot because it's number 6 in a series, and I don't want to mess it up if you decide to go back and begin at the beginning. There's a certain amount of growing pains going on at this point in the story where some of the characters are in their 30s or 40s at this point. They began in their 20s. There's a main character who has become very professionally ambitious, and that is at odds with relationship and friendships. Is that vague enough for you? I'm disappointed in this person at this point in the story. Not for being ambitious, but for some personality changes that the writer has decided to imbue upon this person. I wish that people do change, and sometimes you wish that these changes hadn't happened the way that they do. So I guess in a way it's realistic. And I mean, this is a thing that happens. You have a good friend or a family member, and then you think, what happened to you? So that's kind of happening with one of the characters. And even within the book, people are thinking that about this person. My favorite character is Michael Tolliver. Something that's really interesting in this book, though, as far as it being a refuge from today's daily life, that doesn't really work because this book takes place in the late 80s. And in this book, Michael and his partner are not exactly arguing, but they have a different approach to political tensions of the time. His partner is extremely he's a fiery person. They have a conversation about political issues of the time, and specifically right-wing forces in the Reagan and Bush administrations that want to make access to AIDS care difficult, the price of AZT, which was the drug of the time. And they names these books are always very, very specific in naming people and politicians. So we get names like Jesse Helms in here, and that was a blast from the past. And one of them wants to join organizations and protest, and the other person is more about writing things out and hoping that things are going to get better. And this piece right here really struck me. So they're having this conversation about the tempo of the times. And Thack, Michael's partner, says, "I can't believe how cold-blooded people have gotten." And that just kind of stopped me in my tracks here in 2024, reading this from 1988. And then it says, Michael agreed with him, but he found his lover's anger exhausting. Now more than ever, he needed time for the other emotions as well. So what if the world was fucked? There were ways to get around that if you didn't make yourself a total slave to rage. And I thought, isn't that what we're talking about right now? What do you do with your emotions? Do you put your anger to work? Do you try to dissipate it and have a better emotional balance? This idea of being a slave to rage just really resonated with me. And then the conversation, they kind of come to an impasse, and Michael says, "Well, I don't understand why you're mad all the time." And Thack's reply is, "I don't understand why you're not." So I thought, oh, so many of us are right there at that intersection right now with friends and partners. And anyway, there it was. And it's just another example of how books speak to you across time, across space, you never know when the message is coming or when you're going to be seen, and there it was. All right, so that's where I'm at. I'm also reading Othello, which is our selection this month for the Bard Room, and I'm about halfway through Othello, so I'll talk about it next time. So this weekend, I think I will try to be finishing up Othello and Sure of You, because we're going to be out of town this upcoming week. From Tuesday to Saturday, we're going to be going up to see Stephen's family for Thanksgiving. It is our first Thanksgiving since my mother-in-law passed away in June, and so it's kind of, we want to be there a little more of an expanded time than usual, to be there for his dad and just, just have some family time. So we're going to be out of town. I will be doing a video. I'm going to film something this weekend that'll show up somewhere, maybe in the middle, like Wednesday-ish or something, because I won't be here to make a Tuesday or a Friday video. So I'm going to plunk something over there. I think it's going to be my December TBR. And as far as taking a book to read while I'm out of town next week, I have two contenders. So I'm assuming that I will finish all these things that are currently going. And if I'm picking a book to take, here's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about either Ghost Mountain by Ronan Hession or The Animators by Kayla Whitaker. These are two books from my 10 Before the End list that both kind of feel like maybe the right vibes. Oh, and also I'm going to take along Truman Capote so I can read The Thanksgiving Visitor, and I may or may not start dipping into the Christmas stuff. I am planning to decorate this weekend. I'm getting out my Christmas stuff. I'm decking the halls. I want my halls decked before I leave so that when I come back and it's after Thanksgiving, I will be walking into the Winter Wonderland at the beach. But so that's what's going on. That's what I'm reading. That's what I'm thinking about reading. If you have any opinions or votes about this, let me know. I will be on the road, and I hope that if you are traveling for the Thanksgiving holidays, that you travel safely and you have a wonderful visit with your people. And if that is not your holiday, I hope that you have a good weekend and a upcoming week, and I'll be checking in as soon as I can. Let me know what you think about anything I talked about today in these books, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.